I'm Yinka, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Coming up, every day, every hour, every second, it feels urgent.
Yinka, it has changed me. It's changed every kind of cell in my body doing this work.
It's men who are 3 times more likely to die by suicide.
It's a crisis in a person's ability to regulate their distress. It's a scandal.
Oh my God, you said it. You're listening to The Hurt Locker, a podcast that opens the door on men's mental health. We have a special edition this evening. Tonight we're going to be talking about suicide. And as our special guest, we have Susie Bennett from Glasgow University. Susie, welcome.
Thank you, Yinka. Thank you for having me.
How are
Thank you
you?
for hosting this conversation, which is, an urgent and vital one. So it's great to be here.
I'm glad you said urgent because it feels every day, every hour, every second, it feels urgent. For the benefits of our listeners, tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do in terms of your research.
So yes, I'm a research fellow at the University of Glasgow at their Suicidal Behaviour Research Unit. So it's a research lab dedicated to looking at suicide. And my work specifically focuses on suicide in men. So I'm looking at both the risk factors for men and also recovery factors for men. So what are the kinds of interventions and support that specifically can help men anchor themselves to a more meaningful, fulfilling, peaceful existence. So I just completed a PhD last year, which was 4 years of study, and now I'm into a 1-year fellowship that's being supported by MANUP, which is a men's mental health charity, and they've been very generous in funding this work and understanding the importance of doing research work and building that evidence base to really understand what are some of the drivers of this problem and what are some of the solutions that work specifically for men.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you, as a female, why are you so interested, given the fact that it's men who are 3 times more likely to die by suicide?
Yes, Yinka, it has changed me. It's changed every kind of cell in my body doing this work. It's changed so deeply my kind of understanding of the male experience. And it's brought me at times a lot of shame and a lot of grief for the things that I didn't understand. It makes me emotional to kind of be,
You're making me emotional already. Oh my God.
We're both gone early.
God. Go on.
Yeah, so I grew up with 3 brothers. We were very close as a unit, and so I really was kind of embedded in masculine energy from the beginning of my life, and I received so much care and love and protection from my brothers. And I don't know who I would be today. I don't know that I'd even be here, to be honest, without that support from them. And all of them in different ways experience mental health challenges. And I think it was kind of what entered me into this work was a very sort of personal mission to want to understand how someone gets to the point where they feel they're in so much pain, they don't want to carry on existing anymore. And I started this work around the time that the Me Too movement happened. So it was like 2017. There was this huge explosion in the sort of public sphere about male privilege, male power, abuses of power. And I remember as well seeing this statistic about the suicide rates, suicide being the biggest killer of men under 50. I thought every man I know, the biggest threat to their life is themselves, is this internal pain that's become so enormous. And I thought something between these 2 pillars doesn't make sense to me, that there's this idea that men have all the privilege and all the power, and yet men are also dying from deaths of despair at such huge rates. Like there's a big paragraph missing between those 2 sentences. And then, Yinka, I was obsessed. I mean, I was like an addict, basically, trying to unravel this puzzle. I've described it before like being a dog picking up a scent in the woods and you're just gone.
Yes.
So it became just a sort of central question of my life. And like I said at the beginning of this sort of monologue, that journey that I've been on has changed me so profoundly and so deeply, and really made me deeply emotional for all the ways that I didn't see how difficult it can be to move in the world as a man at times, particularly for certain men.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to delve into this even more. I'm just going to dry my eyes here a little bit. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about growing up. What was family like? You had three brothers, etc. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Farnham, which is about an hour south of London.
Okay.
But when I was about 8 years old, I committed myself to Liverpool Football Club, and I've been a lifelong Liverpool fan ever since.
Why am I smiling? Come on. Come on. Which football player was it?
Do you want the honest truth? It
Yeah.
was when the New Order World Emotion song came out for 1990 World Cup Italia, and I saw John Barnes do the rap, and I
Okay.
thought, this man, wherever he goes, I will follow him. And that
Do
was
me a
it.
favor. Do me a favor. Whenever you meet him, tell him to sort out his dress sense. Those lapels just aren't happening anymore. That power dressing. But go on, sorry.
But yeah, I guess growing up with three brothers, like we played football all of the time, and it was, even now, football is a massive regulation tool for me, like how I process emotions in day to day life. Sometimes it's really useful because I can be very low and Liverpool can play well and it will lift me. But sometimes I can be very low and Liverpool do badly, and I can be thinking I can go deep into an existential crisis. But yeah, I've forgotten your question now. In my
Growing up, yeah, you said Liverpool at the age of 8 and all of that.
yeah.
So you've got three brothers, younger, older than you?
I've got an older brother, two younger brothers that are identical twins, and then a sister as well. My dad had another child. My parents split up and had a very unhappy marriage. So it was a complicated childhood, I would say. And I think it's interesting now because I'm doing a paper, I'm looking at some data, looking at childhood challenges and their relationship with suicide risk. And it's very interesting for me. And again, it makes me really emotional because I really basically in the data, what I'm hearing over and over is men having an experience of not feeling safe in childhood in some dimension, whether it was the care that they were receiving at home didn't feel safe, something about their bodies didn't feel safe in relation to what was expected in the outside world, or something about school didn't feel safe, or relationships outside of the family home didn't feel safe. But this feeling of what does that mean for a child to not feel safe in the world, and how that then sort of becomes the seed from which all this ideas of self, ideas of other people, ideas of emotion starts to blossom. And then I think, Yinka, as well, the thing that makes me doubly emotional is thinking any kid going through a difficult childhood, it's brutal. That's the invisible privilege that we cannot see. I cannot see when I meet somebody on the street, I cannot see that invisible privilege of whether you had safety in childhood or didn't. And the ones that didn't are fighting a psychological battle that can be really brutal. And then I think, what does it mean for the kids that were boys who go through those experiences of unsafety and then are socialized as men to suppress that pain, suppress that
100%.
vulnerability? Where does all that distress ever go to get soothed, to get resolved, to get processed? Really brutal. Like, I mean, it makes me emotional to think about. So yes, I think this idea of safety and psychological safety, and the people that have it and the people that don't, and that we can't really see for always from externally what people's levels are, is an interesting.
It is. It's interesting. It's fascinating. And I think if I'm going to use myself, when you use the words, and I understand this context, the brutality of it emotionally, that for me, what manifested was I had to just fight.
Yeah.
I was just a fighter
Mm,
as a young lad. When I was allowed to be outside, I'd just fight. I'd be aggressive,
mm,
and I didn't realize in my early, mid, late teens how much pain I was actually in.
mm,
I didn't realize. And it took me into my late 20s, early 30s to acknowledge that, wow, Yinka, this has been horrific for
mm,
you. And somehow you've managed to navigate it in some way, shape, or form,
mm,
without harming those who cared for you in the process as well, or those who loved you in the process as well. Because for me, I think as a therapist, I'm not saying that I've got this third eye that I can see things, but you can spot certain signs
mm,
when you sit with people. You can spot how you can take an educated guess throughout people's lives, where their upbringings were.
mm,
It's through simple conversations.
mm,
So it's interesting that you bring that up.
mm.
Were you close to your brothers and sister?
Yeah, we're very close. A lot of I describe it as a very dysfunctional but very loving unit. So they kind of we balance out the challenge with the a deep affection for each other.
Did you say to each other, "I love you," or did we use?
Oh my god, all the time, all the time. Like even I chatted to my brother today. He will always tell me that he loves me. He's an incredible human being, a beautiful man, and he carries a deep sense of responsibility for things beyond his remit. And it's very beautiful as a woman to experience that kind of love from a man.
Yes,
It's very. I find it very moving, and the same with my male friends who really that care that you receive and that protection, and it's it gives you a sense of real security. Having talked a bit already about psychological safety, and if you don't get it in certain ways, and I didn't get it in certain ways in childhood, but I got it hugely through my brothers. I had incredible male friends when I was growing up who were so important to me. And I think friendship between the genders is so necessary.
100%,
Mm.
100%. Those friendships, did you eke them out, or was it a natural gravitation?
I think there was a natural gravitation. I think because I grew up with three brothers, I've always been super easy in male company.
Yes.
And so I think it was, to not sort of get us off topic too much, but I think that there is a very urgent conversation that has to be had about the fear that a lot of women have because of certain experiences towards men, and that does then become a barrier in dynamics between genders. Whereas for me, because I grew up with three brothers that I was very, very close to, and I got so much safety from them that I never had that same experience of that fear. So I always had I always had just enjoyed sort of male company so much, and had a real and felt a sense of protection within it, I suppose, growing up. Like because me and my brothers are all 4 years apart. So
Okay.
all the local lads knew me. Either they were at school in my year, or they knew me as like, that's Johnny Bennett's sister, or that's, the twin sister. And so you had like, there was this feeling of like being looked out for in that way, which I also
Absolutely.
found very moving. If you don't feel safe in another area of your life, those
You
kind of
can
things
go,
become
yes.
very powerful.
It's interesting you say that, because I remember working for a national suicide prevention charity and working on the telephones, and invariably I'd receive phone calls of females, and their initial response would be, I'm finding it difficult to talk to you. Can I talk to a female instead? And I'd
Yeah,
say to them, my stance would always be this: I hear what you're saying, but
yeah,
let's talk first. If after
yeah,
5, 10 minutes you're finding it too difficult, then put the phone down and phone us back again, and hopefully
yeah.
you'll get a female advisor. And 9 times out of 10,
They
they would
stay.
stay on the phone.
Yeah,
And I think for me, the argument's this: I know bad things happen. I know that horrific things occur for females, but please don't tarnish all men,
yes,
because
yeah,
what happens then is you're reducing 50% of that
yeah,
potential support that's available
yeah,
for you.
yeah, yeah. And like I say, I don't know that I would be here. Certainly not in the forum I am without that support from that 50%.
Yeah, thank you. Let's dive in then.
Okay.
Let's dive in. The World Health Organization says that a person dies by suicide
Mm.
every 40 seconds. We know that in the UK, that 13 people a day will die by suicide, okay?
Mm.
That men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. Why is that? Oh, let's go back. What is suicide?
Okay, great question, Yinka. Great question. I mean, to not go off too much off topic, there are obviously like different forms of suicide. There's things that have been described as slow suicides, which may be addictions or eating disorders, where you're not necessarily taking one action that is decisive in ending your life, but you may be sort of in a slow withdrawal from existing. I understand suicide, Yinka. This is where I've arrived as a crisis of distress, is a crisis in a person's ability to regulate their distress. Now, the causes of that distress are often nothing about the individual, is about often external factors in their life, things that they've endured, what we've already touched on, childhood experiences that were beyond the control of a kid. They were just what they were inherited by the environment that they grew up in. Structural factors around like poverty,
Discrimination, housing, lack of
discrimination,
social mobility, etc.
all of that kind of stuff. Your psychological development in terms of, do you develop a robust self esteem or do you not? Do you develop a healthy relationship with your emotions? Are you able to identify for yourself what your feelings are? Are you able to express those feelings and needs to other people? Are you able to develop trusting, intimate, meaningful, connected relationships with other people? All these different factors can contribute to the distress that somebody feels. And suicide, basically, for me, is when I mean, I think you've described it as a hurt locker. I describe it as like a tank of psychological pain. So each of you've got your own tank of pain. I've got my own tank of pain. And basically, each of us have had our own experiences in life that have poured pain into that tank. And if you imagine a pipe at the bottom, which is kind of your regulation pipe, it should be
Yes,
taking that pain out. And if you've
yes,
got high exposure to pain and you've been given inadequate tools to regulate that pain's just going to get higher and higher until it reaches a threshold where it feels intolerable to you. And that's the suicide that I study and explore, is what happens, how are men getting to the point, certain men getting to the point where there's so much pain in their tank, what's happening to their regulation tools, why haven't they been afforded good tools to regulate their pain, and what can we do then to reduce the exposure and then also sort of help support some of those regulation tools. But that's how I think about suicide, as this kind of crisis of distress. And then when you, from that angle as well, there's kind of two layers of intervention, in the sense that once my pain's at my threshold, interventions then become about moment to moment. Like I'm in a crisis situation now, and I need to manage that moment by moment until that sort of, I think of it as like a suicidal fog, till that dissipates. Once that dissipates, we can start thinking about a second layer of intervention, which is how do we, on a long term, get some of that pain
De-escalates,
out of the
yes.
tank. Yeah. So that's how I think about it.
Would you say if somebody does experience suicidal ideation and has a plan, do you think that this is what we hear, and you're going to hear some clips,
Mm,
hopefully, in this? Some people will say that, well, if they want to do it, then they'll do it. And I've always been of the thought that most people who are experiencing thoughts of suicide are in distress,
mm,
but they need that outlet there. And
mm,
often they haven't exhausted or explored or found that outlet for them that will bring them back from that precipice, as it were.
mm. Yeah.
So I think the point for me is I do a lot of work in terms of interventions.
Mhm,
I'll use the ASSIST model, the Applied
mhm,
Suicide Intervention Skills
mhm.
Training model, but I'll do other little bits and pieces as well. But I also believe, for me, it's always about the rapport, the connection, that people just need to have that connection with somebody.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're sociable beings.
Yes. Yes. Can I tell you a beautiful story that follows on from what you've said, which I think encapsulates what you're saying so perfectly? I met a psychotherapist about probably 10 years ago now who worked with Holocaust survivors. And he said to me, one of his clients said to him once when he was in the camp that he remembers another campmate gave to him like a small piece of bread. And he was, this man was starving at this point, and this other guy in the camp gave him this small piece of bread. And basically, that small piece of bread in no way sated his physical hunger, like he was ravenous, but it sated a kind of emotional hunger to know that
Yes,
people were still good, people were
yes,
still kind, you could matter to somebody, you could have connection, and that gave him a sort of power for survival. And I think that's what you're describing. In those moments of crisis, we can be medicine for one another, like things like the Samaritans, those sorts of crisis lines. That is human medicine. I find it so moving. Other human beings saying, "I want to volunteer my time to be that medicine for somebody who needs that when they're at that point of feeling completely overwhelmed." Like that's when I think, God, humans are magic somehow.
and you just saying that word magic, I truly fundamentally believe that
Mm,
we've got so much. I honestly don't believe we know what we're truly capable of, because we're capable of beautiful things. But
yeah.
it just seems that the way the world is at this moment in time, we're focused in this direction instead of focusing in that direction,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
And you
Um,
must think it in your work as well. You must witness really profound transformations in people. So you see that possibility of like things are not fixed. Think people can, with the right support, with the right accompaniment, they can.
100%. And I believe that. I mean, I think with some people, no, let me, on a personal level, there's a fear about talking about suicide. There's a
Mm,
fear about talking about distress. But the reality is that we should be leaning into this, because it could be your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, your brother, or sister who's struggling.
yeah.
And if a person's dying every 40 seconds, and if I'm not available and one of my family members or friends is struggling, I'd want somebody to feel comfortable to be able to lean in and say, can I help?
Mm,
Or what do you need?
mm,
And too often people are fearful that I'm not going to say anything. I'll let the next person who comes along
yeah.
step
Yeah.
in and do the
Yeah.
work then. And
Yeah.
basically, most people, all they want, if they can't say help themselves, then intuitively we should be able to say, do you need help?
Mm,
Or how can I help you?
mm,
And we ignore our gut instincts in those moments of distress, etc.
mm,
Tim's going to play a little a few little clips and all of that. As I said, we've collated some audio guides from previous guests here on the Hurt Locker.
Thank you, Yinka. So I asked David Fgrave, great guest. He's been on episode 3 and 12, friend of the show, why men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. Here's some of his thoughts.
But yeah, something about the way men work, and I mean that mentally, or how that society has educated us, which I said with a really weird emphasis, means that we're not so used to talking about it, or whatever it is. And so these things build and build and build, and no one knows. If you feel that you have to hide any kind of what you perceive to be weakness, which I know I've certainly done, it builds and builds and builds. And sometimes people know nothing about this. And then one thing, be it big, be it small, happens that makes you feel desperate, and you've got no one to turn to because you don't have the tools. You don't really know how to approach this. At that moment, if you don't have the support network, you don't have your own awareness of how your mood is going up and down, it can cause something to happen that means you're gone. And that seems to be a very male thing. And also, you look at the way men look and approach physical health. I mean, I don't think there's any difference between mental and physical health. The brain's in the body, so it's a stupid concept to make them different. But, you know, I do material in my stand-up about the fact my dad had a hernia for 30 years. And for many, many years, well, for most of that time, didn't tell the doctor, eventually told us, but that was a good few years in. And he continued to worry about it. And we would say, well, look, speak to the doctor. You know, we think there's nothing serious, because the very fact that you're still here this many years in suggests it's not serious. But speak to the doctor. And he didn't. That seems to be a very male thing too. You've got an injury. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'll leave it to the last moment. People's fear of the male fear, for example, of a prostate exam, in many ways is ridiculous. But because we're not attuned to our bodies, maybe in the same way that women are, they're more attuned to these things. And they know, well, I need to do this and this to ride this out. Men, we don't do that. We don't tell people. We let the injury fester before we say anything.
Susie, I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, it's emotional to listen to, and a lot of it echoes what I see in my research. So we did a big review of 20 years worth of studies on male suicide, so 20 years worth of qualitative research, looking at common risk factors across those studies. So it was looking at 78 different male suicide studies, and in 96% of those papers, we saw a relationship between particular norms of masculinity and male suicide risk. And these norms related to 3 different psychological areas. So the first one was about men's relationship with their emotions. So exactly as David described, these ideas that men are told by societies and cultures to suppress their emotions impacts your own ability to understand what you are feeling. And that is so dangerous, because your emotions are a sort of temperature check on how you are, what you want to be doing, what's happened to you, whether it's okay or whether it's not. So saying to men, you don't get to have a relationship with that temperature checker is absolutely insane. I remember speaking to a man in his 60s. He'd made an attempt on his life, and he said to me, in the lead up to his attempt, he'd had the thought to himself, it were better for him to die than to tell his wife he was struggling. And I'm meeting this beautiful, intelligent, articulate, kind man who thinks that he's better off dead than telling this woman that he spent X amount of years with and who loves him dearly and who he loves dearly, that he's struggling. I mean, that is such a cultural violence enacted on a group of people. And it's so distressing how dangerous the consequences can be. So we see the impact of these norms of masculinity in relation to men's emotions, and then also in the impact on men's relationships with themselves. So how they think and feel about themselves as men, and this feeling that they're not living up to certain expectations of male success. And then these feelings of failure have come. And then exactly as David described, this sort of performance of self that can happen for some men, that you're pretending to the external world that you're well and coping, and your internal experience is something completely different. And then you get this distressing chasm, basically, between how you're presenting to the outside world and your reality on the inside. And then the third area that we see impacted for men is around their relationships with others. So, how norms of masculinity can sort of diminish and deny men's relationship needs. So, how ideas of emotional suppression, of independence, self reliance, coping alone, being strong, how that isolates you from people, how it isolates you from intimate, meaningful connection on some levels for men. And so this sort of interaction of harm in those three sort of psychological areas, emotion, self, and others, is sort of comes up in our research.
What needs to happen? What needs to change then? Because the first point you make, I always use, I'm not an academic, so I'll use the media, I'll use Hollywood as a template for what is a man, and I'm showing my age, but from the days of John Wayne right through 60s, the 70s, your Clint Eastwoods, the 80s, your Arnold Schwarzeneggers, to your Bruce Willises. These are all supposed to be the blueprints for what a man should be. Never cries.
Yeah.
Is not even resilient, but they always overcome adversity. But they're never there checking in on their own emotions.
Mm.
It's always interesting for me because I do always ask the question, if I say the word vulnerability, what does it mean to you?
Mm.
And I think it's changing slightly, but most people, particularly most guys, will say they'll see it as a sign of weakness automatically.
Yeah.
But if I look at Brené Brown, for example, she's one of my doyennes, queens, as it were. She'll say that it's your superpower.
Yeah.
And to embrace it. And that's what I try and encourage men and women to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so, I have so much compassion for it at the same time as well, because I grew up in an environment of high emotional suppression. I struggle so much to cry in front of someone else. I'm having therapy at the moment, and my therapist reflected like how controlling I am of my vulnerability. So if I start to speak about something and I'm getting distressed, I will not let myself cry. Like, it's so ingrained, that kind of impulse to kind of not show that you're struggling, which is a long kind of history for each individual. But I can understand how ingrained that sort of pattern of thinking becomes. And sometimes for me, I have to understand there are different ways in which I may express tears.
Yes.
Or if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Sorry, Tim, you're going to come in?
No, just really quickly, we have another clip from David, and it's just on point with what you're saying. So here's some more of David's thoughts on particularly showing weakness, showing emotions as a man.
I guess for some reason, men can be quite isolationist in their approach to these things. And I guess we're partly taught that. For it to be so endemic, we must be, in that, particularly in our generation and above, taught that that's the way to be, that all of the cliches about, men don't cry, big men don't cry, and other Frankie Valli songs are available. Yeah, that sort of sense of to what it is to be a man, for some reason, whatever that means that we can't, or we seem to be less inclined to show what we perceive to be weakness.
Okay, just before I get your reflections on David's comments, I'm just going to squeeze in another audio clip from Keith Mullen from The Farm as Yinka asked a really prevalent question.
We've got a situation whereby men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. The high-risk group, 45 to 59 for men. Why do you think that is?
Conditioning. And what I mean by that, it's how you're conditioned as a man to be a man for all your life, which you're not supposed to share things. There has to be a significant part of it, because otherwise the men would be talking up and speaking, and they're not. And they're not because you feel inadequate. There has to be some form of conditioning in how we raise our children, and how we raise our what the man's role in society. the expectations of men, deep rooted. They're really, really rooted in the expectation, I suppose, that's placed upon you. It's as I kind of alluded to you earlier, it's seen as weakness to share these things.
Susie, you've heard their conditioning, etc. And I'm wondering if there is an interplay here between our environments, as you've alluded to, the biology, our culture, the psychology. Can we predict the suicidal mind?
I find the conversation about prediction really challenging because a lot of funding in research goes towards people that want to develop prediction models. And I think if you've spent time in deep conversation with a lot of people who are suicidal, you are staggered by the diversity.
100%. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
And it's always revealing to me of the people that are not actually in direct communication with people who are suicidal, because I think, for me, the thing that's consistent is that the distress is overwhelming and they don't know how to deal with it. But other than that, there are a million different pathways to that door of despair. And just listening to those clips now, and two things I wanted to say: this idea of isolation and loneliness. This is the thing, Yinka, that absolutely broke my heart with this research, is understanding how lonely men can be in plain sight. That's the thing that absolutely killed me when I started to think about the men that I love and how, isolated that they can become despite the love that you may feel for them. And then the second thing I want to say about the conditioning that I think is really, really important is the compassion that we need to afford men in relation to that conditioning. Like, for simplicity, I compare it to this idea that as a woman, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when there was this sort of size zero phenomenon. And women were told you needed to be a size zero, you've got to be stick thin, and that's your value as a woman. And now in 2024, we have this culture that's really body positive, and I'm being told as a woman, celebrate your body, you're beautiful however you manifest. Now, I've had 42 years of conditioning. I can't switch a light bulb and instantly go, do you know what? I feel fabulous and I feel empowered and beautiful in my physical form. It's the same with men. We may be now understanding, do you know what? We've been doing horrific cultural violence to men in some of these norms that all of us have kind of inherited. It's not like we all sat down and said, this is what we think men should do and behave. This is just what we've inherited and we perpetuate. But we have to afford the same compassion for men, that it's not an instant transition from being told to suppress your feelings to suddenly being, oh, I can talk about them. That makes it instantly available for me to express my vulnerability. There's a whole journey that has to happen.
100%. And you've got me firing off questions and all different ways there. The compassion, the language in of itself needs to change.
Yeah, big time.
That will take time. The fact that people, even though suicide was decriminalized in 1961, people still say committed suicide. And we're talking 63 years later. So in terms of the way that we behave and have that self-compassion for ourselves as men, but in terms of the wider society and the expectations from men, that needs to evolve and change over time. And I think there's also another thing in terms, I'd be interested to hear your views on the genetics and how that can influence siblings, etc., in terms of suicide.
Yeah, I focus on sort of social cultural psychology. So I look at how social and cultural ideas impact people's psychology, so thoughts and feelings and behaviors. There's, of course, a huge component of this question that'll be purely biological. So things that are biological differences between men and women may elevate men's risk, which is not an area that I look at. Which again, epigenetics, I think there's a huge amount of stuff that's potentially going on there, particularly with this finding that we have around challenges in childhood, how experiences of trauma or adversity or neglect or bullying, how that, the sort of biological impact of that, what that does to somebody's stress system, all those kind of things are all critical parts of the kind of puzzle. The way I think about suicide is I picture suicide as like a symphony of sorrow. So you have this orchestra with all these different instruments that are combining to make the sound. And so you don't look at an orchestra and go, oh, well, it's the violin player in the fifth row that's producing the sound. We understand that it's all these musicians in conjunction with each other. And I think it's the same with suicide risk factors. There's, factors to do with culture, there's factors to do with biology, there's factors to do with upbringing, and then all these different factors that contribute to this sort of symphony of sorrow that gets created that's unique. Every suicide is its own melody.
Absolutely.
Every single suicidal person or suicidal death represents an individual human being who had a complex, vivid interior life and biology and external experiences that happened to them.
You've just got me thinking on so many different levels. Can I ask, because I've heard what you said then, and you alluded to culture and all that. One of the things that I'm mindful of is that in the UK, 6,500 people die by suicide. That's what the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, records. But they don't break it down by ethnicity in there.
Yeah.
And I have a massive issue about that.
It's a scandal.
Oh my God, you said it.
Yeah. It's an absolute scandal.
Why? Because how then can you support people or know where to target resources if you don't even know what?
Yeah.
Can you say more about that, please?
It's just unforgivable. I don't know enough about why that's happened and whether there's complicated reasons about. It doesn't make any sense to me. It feels like it's just something that can't be that difficult to implement and so vital and so necessary, because you're rendering then invisible, potentially critical groups of people. It's the same with suicide research. It's been really poor in capturing data about disabilities. So we know very little about people living with different kinds of disability, what suicide rates are or specific risk factors. Yinka, there's so much research that needs to happen. I mean, it is just crazy. And then this is when it drives me absolutely bananas. Talking about compassion, that we can't even have a civil conversation about the need for a minister for men. So, like, politically, where do I go now with my findings? Who's going to help me make some meaningful change around this on a political level? Like, I have to have a minister or a ministry that I can go to and say, help me, like, give this a platform, give this a voice. And the fact that it's people are afraid to politically support that.
Why do you think that is?
Because we have a real compassion deficit. Okay. There's this great Martin Seeger and John Barry, two psychologists who talk about the empathy gap, this gap between our empathy when it comes to men and the fact that the way that we're socialized, because we're all socialized in expectations of men and ideas of men, and that one of the products of that socialization is that we will more readily see men as privileged than as disadvantaged, and we more readily see men as causing harm than being harmed. Yes. Now, when I, in relation to my work in male suicide, I'm speaking to men who've been harmed so much in their lives. Okay. They've experienced so much harm. And when they feel like there's no space for them to have that harm heard, again, coming back to this idea of isolation, we're leaving these group of men alone with their pain. And that's such a dangerous place to be leaving them.
Because when you talk about the isolation, when you talk about the harm, the pain, I think about the trauma of all of that, but I also think about the shame that they're left with. So many men
Absolutely.
I've come into contact with in the 40s, 50s, and 60s therapeutically will say, this is the first time I've ever spoken about this.
Yeah.
And it's been a lifetime of shame and guilt that they've been holding on to. Why has it taken so long for them to be heard, to be listened to? You know, why is it taken so that they can sit in front of me to be the first time that they can feel comfortable to talk about how they are feeling or what happened? You know, that's just...
It's so brutal, Yinka. It is so, so, so brutal. What's being asked of that group of people, it is because pain is pain. It's painful. It is painful to be in pain. If you've had painful things that have happened to you, even if you're suppressing the pain, it hasn't left your body.
The body keeps the
It keeps the
score.
score. Exactly. It's holding on to it, and it will be acting out in ways that you probably don't always necessarily realize.
100%.
And it will be causing you pain.
100%. The word you used before, the slow suicide, you call it.
Yeah.
Tim's got a little clip now from an American comedian, Jim Mendrinos. Take it away, Tim. Just going back, when you spoke about seasonal affective disorder and depression, you did touch upon suicide or suicidal ideation. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Open that up a little bit for the benefits of the audiences.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, just had to make a decision. As somebody who has attempted and failed in terms of suicide, I've gotten that dark, and I'm fortunate in that my attempt, I've learned I'm shitty at trying to commit suicide. And I'm making light of it because of how serious it is. But I've been that dark, and I didn't seek help. And I got to the point where I thought, this is, hopeless, and I can't do it. And I tried, and I failed. And what I've told other people that ask me about it, because I've had other comics say, have you ever tried suicide? Yes. Why haven't you tried it a second time? There's, as bad as you feel when you're going to make that attempt, for me it was pills, for other people it was other things. When you wake up the next day and life is still waiting there for you, you're at a crossroads. You got to decide, do I, try to kill myself again? Or am I going to take this as I got to do something? I took it as I got to do something. I'm not going to say I haven't gotten close again. I have. For me, this past November and December were particularly bad, to the point where I was reaching out to therapists. I was reaching out to friends going, I'm sorry, somebody needs to take care of me. I need help. And I was reaching out to my core group when I should have been reaching out to my lady and my kid. And that took me a while to learn, because I still did not want to seem weak in front of those two people.
What are your thoughts?
It's emotional, because you think, hearing that man say, when he's in that dark place and he's not reaching out to his wife and kids because he doesn't want to seem weak to them. And I work with bereaved families all the time. I see the absolutely harrowing pain that they're left with. And you think your wife and kid would want nothing more in that moment. I mean, I'm speaking on their behalf, but that's my experience of the bereaved families I've worked with, especially the ones where we sort of see suicide on the spectrum almost of deaths where there was a long history of sort of mental health challenges or real low points. And it was almost, nobody expects it necessarily, but there was some anticipation, I think, with families that may happen.
Yes.
And then at the other end of the spectrum, families that just have no indication that anything, even a sniff of this, is possible. So those families never get an opportunity to try and intervene, and it's so heartbreaking. I mean, I thought it was beautiful when he said, after making an attempt, and then when he's got low again, but saying to people, someone needs to take care of me. I found that really emotional because that, I think I can imagine how much of a journey he must have been on to get to the point where he could verbalize that and say that out
Yes.
loud.
Help.
And
Yes.
yeah, especially as, I mean, I don't know what his childhood was like, but if you've not had experience as a kid of being taken care of, how do you, it's so difficult to ever learn that you have the right to ask people that care of you, for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And as Tim just
yeah,
reminded me, that was the first time that he'd ever shared it on a podcast or TV and media, etc.
wow.
And he even said towards the end of the podcast, he said, "I may talk about suicide in my routine now," because he'd never spoken
Mm,
about it, which I thought was, wow, that's a massive step.
that's huge.
Yes.
That's huge. Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, I've had thoughts of suicide in my lifetime. I've had them. I had my first one when I was about 18. I had my last one probably 5 weeks ago. So it's, for some people, it's part of the repertoire of thoughts and feelings that you have when life gets very low. And for me, it's been like very important for me to normalize to the people around me that I am somebody that when I get very low, I can go into that sphere of thinking, but also to acknowledge and admit that to myself so that I can start to take responsibility because I don't actually want to move in the direction of where those thoughts and feelings might take me.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a straight question. Do
Yeah.
you want to die?
No,
Okay.
absolutely, I don't.
Okay, so how does it feel sharing what you said 5 weeks ago?
Yeah.
You were contemplating.
Yeah, it's like, this is why I call it like a suicidal fog, because for me it's like this fog descends upon you and it's like you lose your bearings. You can't see clearly anymore and you feel in so much distress and you don't know how to get rid of it. And in that moment you can start to think and feel like death is some way in which your distress can be resolved. And what it is about, well, what are the tools that you need to manage that period of crisis? Because that's not the resolution I want.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's knowing that as well for yourself and taking responsibility.
Do you? Oh my gosh! Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Seriously, thank you for sharing that. Let me just look at postvention.
Yeah.
Working with those families who've been bereaved by suicide. I do some work with Suicide Bereaved KSB UK, and the research that they've done, etc. And that when when somebody's been bereaved by suicide, then the research tells us that if you've been affected by this, then you're 80 to 300%
Mm.
higher than the national
Mm.
average to die by suicide. Given the fact that we know all of this, why isn't more being done?
Mm.
Is it that society, government are very slow to step up and
Mm.
make a difference? And I say this because at any one time, year on year, 1 in 60 individuals is impacted by a suicide.
Mm.
But that obviously, when you extrapolate that, that increases,
Mm.
But as a society, we're doing in this country, it feels like we're doing very little about it.
Mm.
Sorry, it was a rant more than anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. I mean, I agree so much with what you're saying. And I think, an aspect of it as well is how we learn to normalize holding those conversations about suicide so that people aren't left so isolated with their grief when their grief is about a death by suicide. Because I do think that for certain bereaved people, their experience is one of quite profound loneliness afterwards because people don't really know how to come alongside them in that type of death. And so the more sort of it's a complex balancing act, I think, with thoughts and feelings of suicide and conversations about suicide, of needing to normalize it, but needing to take it very seriously at the same time as well. So,
Yes.
like what I was saying about my own thoughts and feelings, like I've needed to normalize it for myself, but at the same time to take it very, very seriously.
Do you think finance has got a lot to play with all of this?
What just money? What's available for
Yeah,
research or
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
Julie Sorrell will say that when one person dies by suicide, 135 people are affected. The government says that every death by suicide is equivalent to £1.7 million lost. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if that's the case, channel some money into it to prevent it occurring and occurring and occurring.
mm,
And we're not seeing that.
yeah. I think I mean, not to get too political, and this isn't. There's so many things that, in a way, I guess the government becomes implicated for in terms of what's a suicide risk factor, like housing, employment, all these different things that the government then would become, becomes responsible for, potentially contributing to the amount of pain that somebody is experiencing. What gives me optimism and hope is these beautiful, beautiful community interventions that are emerging in this space, like these male peer support groups, things like MANUP, who
Mm.
fund my work, Talk Club, Andy's Club in Liverpool. There's a beautiful, I mean, there's James's Place, which is
There's
amazing. There's
James's place, there's Sean's place as
Sean's
well.
Place. I love. I don't know if you've had Debbie on, who runs it. She's
No.
she's human magic. So she lost her brother to suicide, and then she's been on this mission ever since to support as many men that she can. And she's an absolute powerhouse, like making things happen. So I was going back to what I said earlier, like this medicinal power that we have to take care of each other. Just humans wanting to be alongside other humans, or men wanting to take care of other men. Like this kind of movement of community intervention, I find very hopeful.
Is that what you're advocating? I come from a background of community development whereby the local authorities just do the bare minimum. The private sector are only there to reap as much profit as possible. And so that community activism is that spongy bit in the middle, whereby they're not interested about profit or loss, but they're interested about what works effectively. And it feels like you're advocating a call for arms for let the community decide then and dictate and shape what needs to be done then.
And I think also let men decide how they want to be helped, how they want to be supported, because I see such diversity in terms of what different men tell me has been effective for them. So some men have had terrible experiences on medication. Some men have had good experiences. Some men have had brilliant experiences with therapists. Some have had shocking ones. Some men have been so sort of socially indoctrinated with this idea of self-reliance. They really want to have tools that they can self-manage a crisis. They want to be able to do that privately. So watching YouTube videos, podcasts like this, things that help them make sense of themselves, where they can manage their pain, privately, is important for some men. I hear so many brilliant things about these peer support groups, community interventions. I think they have a special place because when they're volunteer run, you have that feeling that that person is there with you just because they care.
Yes.
And I think there's something that's so healing about that. I think conversations with other men where other men are saying things that they found difficult, you're normalizing struggle, normalizing the shame that you've spoken about, normalizing feelings of failure. Like that is there's a permission that men can offer each other that I as a woman can't come in and do in the same way. And the other thing that I think is important about these peer support groups is that they're reciprocal bonds. So not only do you get to be supported, you get to offer support back. And I think for many men, that's really important, that you also get a sense of taking care of others, of being that protector. And that's a beautiful quality. But I also think, I do think like a therapeutic exploration of your pain is really important. But I also acknowledge that we're in a system where waiting lists are brutal, where private costs can make it out of reach for a lot of men. So we did a paper, Yinka. We did a study looking at the barriers that men who are suicidal experience around seeking help. And in a way, like the obvious thing that I think people would say would be the biggest barrier was that men would think it would be weak to go and get help.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, the biggest barriers we found were men saying, I desperately want help, but I cannot afford it. Or men saying, I've been for help and the help was shit.
Yeah.
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 So actually, it was nothing to do with men not wanting help. They wanted it, but they couldn't afford it, or the help wasn't what they needed.
Okay, so is there something there about the language that's employed and how men ask for help? Sometimes and often people will say, I've got an example of a client a few years ago whose friend died by suicide, and he was having relationship issues, and he went round all his mates, and all his mates said to him, get your head down, get your head down, get your head down, just sleep on it. And sadly, he died by suicide that weekend. But he'd been round 5 people, wanting to connect, to have a conversation, to be held. And they all, in their own ways, missed it. None of them felt that it would have led, that reaching out for support would have led to suicide. And I'm wondering whether or not how we talk, how we interact, how we converse, does that become a barrier as well? Because sometimes people can't just say it in the straightest way. My name's Yinka, I'm suicidal and I need some support. Can't say it like that.
And I mean, again, this is where sort of cultural norms in a way can play a role. So we've seen evidence as well of men saying they've been in crisis, they've gone to a health professional, and then they've explained in very matter-of-fact terms the distress that they're feeling. And because we're all socialized in a way to kind of think if someone's in crisis, everything's kind of big, emotions are big, and the distress is big. And so the health professionals have read this man as not being in crisis because he's not displaying the sort of markers of distress that we're primed to see. And actually this man was in tremendous distress. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, we need to listen in a different way to men, and we have to make sure that the space we're providing is safe and compassionate. That for me is absolutely huge, because there's no point as a society and culture saying men need to talk more if we're also, on the other hand, like demonizing men and shaming men about masculinity. It doesn't make it feel safe. Like, the times in my life when I've spoken about the things that I'm most vulnerable about, it's so, I mean, once you've done it, it's remarkable how easy it was.
Yes.
But to get to that moment internally, I'm climbing a Mount Everest in my mind. And the person that I'm speaking to doesn't necessarily know that I'm climbing that to do that. But I need the environment around me. Like, what I'm about to do is so sort of significant. You need that to be an environment where there is compassion in the room for you, for who you are in the world. Sorry, Yinka, just another thought on that I think is really important. A lot of men that I've spoken to who are suicidal feel awful about themselves. They have very, very, very low opinions of themselves. Not all men, but some of them. So this idea then, if you feel like a piece of shit, you do not feel like you deserve compassion from other people.
100%. And can I just and one of the words I love to hear is the word burden. because for me, that's like a gateway for me. That opens up so many possibilities, but the opportunity to dig down and
Into
have those
that.
meaningful conversations,
Yeah.
just to hear that word itself.
Yeah.
It means so many different things for me. And I suppose being attuned to how people talk is critical and its importance. Talk to me a little bit about compassion then. What is it? I know.
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. What is compassion? It's a great question. For me, like in some ways, compassion, the most compassionate thing I think you can sometimes do is give someone your time and attention. So in this moment, like you're being very compassionate in your how you're conducting this conversation with me, in that you were giving me time and you were giving me your attention to explore the things that I have to say. And that's it. Like when you are compassionately listening to somebody, you're journeying with them through what they're doing. When you're giving them that space and you're giving them, most importantly, your attention, so you're actually listening to what they're saying, if you're actually paying attention, you will often naturally feel that sense of what's the thing I want to ask next? What am I curious about then? What might that mean for this person? How might that make somebody feel? You're not going to get to that unless you're in that time and attention with somebody. And often, I think when I speak to men who are suicidal, the biggest thing often that they want is just that space to really unpack and explore what it means to have this feeling inside of you that you don't think you can carry on in existence. And to have people that are able to come alongside that and say, I can be compassionate to that and I can give you time and attention to explore what that might mean for you is so vital, because if we don't do that, then the person that they're having the conversation with is themselves. And often that can be the most dangerous person for you to be talking to at times.
Yes.
What do you think of compassion? What does it mean for you and what do you think of it in relation to men?
I listen to the way we talk about ourselves. I listen to the language we employ if we make errors and mistakes. How do we, if we do it all, admonish ourselves? If we err, are we kind? Are we considerate?
Mm,
Or are we brutal?
mm,
And I often say to people when in therapeutic space, whose voice is that I'm listening to?
yeah. Yes.
Is it yours or something that you've been conditioned or being passed on, foisted onto you
Yeah.
from when you were a child? And I find that really interesting as well, because as you say, if you allow people sometimes to listen or to just have that conversation with themselves, then it can go left, as it were. But if they take the time and the space to say, no, that was in the past, that wasn't me. That was somebody who was trying to paint that picture of me. This
Mm,
is me now. And you alluded to the word before, earlier on, permission, just to be.
mm,
But you need a time and a space for that. And in order for that to happen, a lot of healing needs to occur. And that
yeah.
can't be done in a session of therapy. You can't undo a lifetime of pain in just one session.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got goosebumps listening to you say that. Absolutely right. I mean, I'll be managing my mental health till I die. It's really interesting what you just said. I don't know how much I can swear on this podcast, but
You can fucking help
there's,
yourself, knock yourself out.
there's something that my therapist is making me do, because prior to about 3 weeks ago, I would call myself a cunt
Oh,
multiple times
girl,
a day.
why? What? Fucking hell. I'll be
I would
having words with you. You serious?
I would honestly do it multiple times a day, and exactly like you said, you've internalized someone else's voice, and you don't. I didn't realize how often I was doing it since my therapist has said to me, you need to kind of stop yourself every time you go to do that. And now that I'm being strict with myself and doing that, I'm going, oh my God, Susie, you did that a lot. Like, I would finish this podcast and I would start thinking about things that I said. And that's what I would do, start calling myself, you know. And so but what's kind of hopeful for me about it is that once this behavior was highlighted for me, once I started to realize, oh, that's not my voice. That's a voice I heard from another place. And I don't like that voice.
Good.
So I certainly don't want it in my brain. And I can actually control it. I can say when it starts, hey, you know, I don't want to hear you right now. So there is something, you're absolutely right. None of that gets changed with one session, but you can start to basically build up your toolkit that you can then, when you're in your hurt locker, I've suddenly got better tools to start, you know, tweaking some of these pipes with.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Who's the most important person in your life?
Wow.
You can only pick one person.
I mean, there was a time I would have said Jurgen Klopp, but obviously, like
Jurgen's got done now. Yeah.
But the person that's been most meaningful to me is my older brother.
Okay. Johnny
Bennett, yeah.
Okay. That rolls off the tongue, you know. I'll never forget that now, you know, Johnny Bennett. Okay. Are you going to pick him?
Yeah.
Okay. How would you feel if I told you that you're wrong? How would you feel if I said to you that the most important person in your life is you?
I feel a bit sick.
Tell me why. What's going on for you now?
Yeah, I think I have a really complicated relationship. I think about you know, taking care of myself. I mean, this is kind of, I definitely am getting better because I think through this work you see the consequences of not doing that, and you want to practice what you preach. Yes. But I also do it with a great amount of compassion and respect for how difficult these things are to do when you're fighting very ingrained ideas that you have about yourself that you've accumulated over a long time. It's not that there can be, as you've just described, a kind of instant shift into something different. And I think as well, Yinka, I've always taken, for me, like, a beautiful life has always been one that's been of like surface in a way. Like,
it's funny, I'm sorry to jump in now, but it's funny,
please.
Your research is about that act of service. That's what you're contributing. That's how I saw that. So what your work and what you're doing, that's what the beginning of this podcast. This is your act of service by the compassion, with the feelings, with the love.
Yeah.
And the things that you invest in this. It's important for you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Yinka, you get so much love back. Like this, for me, what a loving and beautiful conversation. Like I've met this stranger. I've never met you in person. This is our first time talking. And we've had a beautiful conversation full of intimacy and safety and connection. I feel very optimistic about human potential and
I'm rocking in the corner.
It gives you nutrients. It gives you nutrients. And if that's why I want, you know, I know how critical that is for me, managing my mental health. And then I think about how many men are starved of those nutrients. And it makes me so sad. And I feel very, very committed to how we start to create more equitable access for people to get those nutrients. But again, it's also, there is a shift of understanding. You have to shift your understanding of yourself, like you're trying to do with me, as somebody worthy of those nutrients, as somebody worthy of care. And and it's difficult, but things can shift and things can change.
I think for me, as you're talking there, I think it's about, from both sides, from both parties, just allowing ourselves to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
To have those honest and open and meaningful conversations, because it's about it's about us being human beings and being able to connect and talk about what's important.
Yeah.
I'm just going to creep in here. So, speaking about vulnerability, sharing, the power of conversation, I think it's a good time to bring in this bit from Rich Wilson, comedian. The title of this episode, if you want to listen to it, is episode 7, The Power of Conversation, and how you can support someone who's going through it.
It's not, you see it in the films and someone goes, oh, I'm feeling really down. Oh, wow. Well, what you should do is blah, blah, blah. It doesn't go like that.
It doesn't
go like, you'll be having a pint with your mate and he'll go, how you doing? And go, oh, do you know what? I've had enough, mate. I'm going to drive my car into a river. And he'll go, okay, mate. He'll either go, all right, mate, keep it light, or he'll go, shit, yeah. I don't know what to say. But you're allowed to say that. You go, I don't know what to say. And then he'll go, oh, sorry, mate, I shouldn't have brought it up. And you go, no, let's work it out. Let's have a chat. We can, because it's new ground for both of you.
Absolutely.
And no one knows how to do it straight away.
Absolutely.
It's just a new thing all round, and it's a fucking clumsy thing you're going to do, and it's awkward, and you're going to feel bad that you're going to go away going, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have said anything. But your mate will be glad that you did. Yeah, I guarantee it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I'm just going to add in another one because I think it's so important what is going to be discussed here. So in this bit, Yinka, you've asked Rich for his reflections. So he's been really vulnerable, and we're honoured, for him to open up about his attempts and his thoughts. And Yinka in this clip asks for Rich's reflections.
You mentioned at the beginning about several times you've contemplated suicide. And when you were talking through that first time you spoke about it and you gave the example, I was wondering, how was it for you an hour, a day, a week afterwards, reflecting back on that time?
I never felt true despair before. And that's what it was. True, raw despair, where there's no other option. There's no one you can talk to. There's no other way out. There's nothing you can do. But the thought, there's that brief moment where you go, I'm going to fucking do it. And there's a relief. You get that feeling of, this is why I understand why people self-harm. Because it relieves them. It's like when you're, I don't know, when you go and buy yourself a burger and chips and you go, oh, that's fucking good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's like you're purging.
Yeah,
when people self-injure, it's a way psychologically of purging the stress that they are experiencing.
Exactly. So when someone cuts themselves or does something that, if they hurt themselves, there's that relief. You go, oh God, that pressure's relief. I've relieved that pressure. And the thought that I was going to go and kill myself, the relief, I was like, oh yeah, because your brain doesn't understand. Your brain goes, oh, we've got a way to stop this feeling. That's what we're going to do. Is your brain can't comprehend, as you know, your brain doesn't know that you can't come back, that's going to be it, because your brain doesn't comprehend death.
Absolutely. It's just about being in that moment.
Yeah. But what I want people to do, if they're listening to this and they've had that same feeling, trust me, that feeling of relief, you've then got to go past that and 100%. Go, right, because I'm telling you now, yeah, it feels good. You go, oh God, yeah, there's a way out. It's not the way to go. It's a beautiful thing that you exist, man. It's a 1 in a million chance that you're here. So let's try and deal with what got you to that point.
No, I will add to that, and I'll say often people feel that they've explored every single option available to them.
Yeah,
that they're devoid of any other answers. That suicide does feel like the option for them.
Yeah, because they think they're going to reboot and they're going to come back.
No, that's it. End of. And when people talk about relief, etc., I'll be happy once it's done. They won't know because they're dead. Susie, your thoughts?
Wow. I mean, I love what they both had to say. It's so perfect. just about saying that it's clumsy and it's awkward, and that, none of us have, well, the majority of us haven't had training necessarily in how to talk about suicide.
Yes.
So there's that, first of all. Then it's, if somebody you love is telling you that, of course, emotionally, you're going to have a reaction, because a person that you love is saying, I'm struggling to stay here. So being compassionate then to yourself about, that's a lot then for you to navigate. And like the guy said, it's potentially then going to be clumsy and it's going to be awkward. But I go back to the things that I've said about what people are seeking often in that moment, is to really just unpack what that might mean for them. Give them time, give them attention, give them that focus. If you feel able to do it, because what I mean to say by that is, it's not you have to know your own, you have to know your own ability to sort of hold space for that kind of conversation. Movember have got a great, it's an AI chat thing, but it basically, you can rehearse talking to, having those conversations about suicide. And I think that's, a nice idea of just getting used to hearing yourself say certain things or think certain thoughts. And then I found it so moving when that man said, it's a beautiful thing you exist. I love to hear somebody that's been suicidal articulate that idea. Like that shows you the possibility for change is there. What you're feeling right now isn't going to dictate the rest of your life unless you do a behavior that ends your existence, and then it will do. And then, you lose all the potential for the opportunities for things to be different. At the same time, I say that with absolute respect for the horrific amount of pain a person will be in, and the amount of time that they will have felt that they cannot endure it anymore. And then when he said about, let's deal with what you got you to this point, like addressing those. Again, for me, it's like a crisis of distress that we've talked about earlier, this crisis of despair. Like, in this moment, I do not know what to do with my despair. And the thing that is giving me, the only thing that gives me relief is the idea of ending my life. So being able to understand, being able to talk to yourself in those moments and saying, I'm having a crisis of distress right now. I'm having a crisis of regulating and coping with my distress. What are some of the tools that I can use that helps me regulate distress? And they are going to be different for every person. And in that moment, it's literally about what's getting you to the next moment. And suddenly I'm transported back to the possibility of like what it feels like, exactly, something different, something other than despair is now in my body.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that the despair isn't going to come back or that it's, it's gone, but it's allowing me to see something different than suicide in that moment. Yes.
Absolutely. And I suppose when you look at the assist model for intervention, it's very much about keeping safe for now.
Yeah.
And that's what you're articulating there. Being able to find something, a medium, whatever, that enables that person to stay safe for now. I think all too often, the fear for people wanting to support others is that they feel that they need to be there constantly on quote unquote suicide watch. They need rescuing for them. And it's not about that. You speak about that suicidal fog, etc., and other people will talk about the forms of the stresses that they have, but it's only for a temporary period of time.
Yeah.
I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I need to for that support.
Yeah. I think there's a great theory of suicide called like the fluid vulnerability theory, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it's saying is that suicidal crises are time limited experiences because the emotion is so heightened, your body cannot sustain it. So I think of it like somebody in the gym holding up a really heavy weight.
Dumbbells, yes.
You can't just hold that up indefinitely. At some point, your body goes, this is too heavy. I need to put it down. And it's the same with those suicidal emotions. And I say that as somebody who's experienced that myself. it ebbs and flows. It's like a suicidal storm, and it will. I completely understand when you're in the thick of it, it feels overwhelming and consuming, but this too shall pass.
100%.
And it does pass. And you can get to a point where you're then speaking on a podcast and saying to somebody, it's a beautiful thing that I exist. Like that's magic.
Susie Bennett, you've been magic. You've been absolutely magic. Can I ask, what do you need?
I mean,
No. What do you need for you?
What do I need for me? I really need people to help me. I mean, I'm gonna make this about work in a way, because it consumes so much of my life. And I need people to help me. Like, we're starting to find things that need to change. I need a minister for men. I need someone that I can go to and politically say, let's start implementing some things. I need secure funding so that, I've got MANUP have been incredible. I've got funding until February, and then it's another unknown. And you get, you're 42, you want to live with a certain amount of kind of stability for your life. And I guess I really need people to listen and to kind of open their hearts to the male experience, because you will enrich yourself so much, because you start to gain this whole additional resource of human beauty. Like the conversation that we've had tonight will stay with me. I feel enriched by it. Every conversation that I've had with a man that's been suicidal has been a conversation so rich with emotional wisdom and insight. And men have told me things that changed the way that I've then looked at the world, or the things that I kind of prioritize. Because in a way, I always think men who are suicidal have so much wisdom because they understand more than anybody the things that make life meaningful. Because those are the things that they're yearning for. Those are the things that they're grieving for. Those are the things that they're crying out to access. And I don't speak to men who in those states are saying to me, I wish I had this kind of car, or I wish that my body looked this particular way. It's they're crying out for connection. They're crying out to be known. They're crying out for their distress to be soothed. They're crying out for purpose, for meaning, connection. And it's reminding you then all of the time, those are the ingredients for a meaningful life. And how am I implementing them in my own existence as well? So, we need each other.
Susie, thank you for being a fabulous guest on the Hurt Locker.
Thank you for being a beautiful host. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you. You're welcome. The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.